A familiar pattern is back in the headlines. U.S. firepower, a leader removed, and the world forced to react. Venezuela is the latest flashpoint, but the script feels painfully familiar. In 1990, Panama's de facto ruler, Manuel Noriega, surrendered after the U.S. invasion, then was flown to the United States to face charges. The message was blunt. Washington can physically remove a leader it labels criminal. In Iraq, Saddam Hussein was captured by U.S. forces on December 13, 2003. Operation Red Dawn. The optics mattered. The fallen strongman, alive, detained, and put on display.
Good afternoon. Yesterday, December the 13th, at around 8:30 p.m. Baghdad time, United States military forces captured Saddam Hussein alive. He was found near a farmhouse outside the city of Tikrit in a swift raid conducted without casualties. And now the former dictator of Iraq will face the justice he denied to millions. The capture of this man was crucial to the rise of a free Iraq. It marks the end of the road for him and for all who bullied and killed in his name.
In 2011, NATO intervention helped tip Libya's civil war. Gaddafi was captured and killed in Sirte as his last stronghold fell, an endpoint that still haunts debates about intervention, legality, and what comes after regime collapse.
Good afternoon, everybody. Today, the government of Libya announced the death of Muammar Gaddafi. This marks the end of a long and painful chapter for the people of Libya, who now have the opportunity to determine their own destiny in a new and democratic Libya. For 4 decades, the Gaddafi regime ruled the Libyan people with an iron fist. Basic human rights were denied, innocent civilians were detained, beaten, and killed, and Libya's wealth was squandered. The enormous potential of the Libyan people was held back, and terror was used as a political weapon. Today, we can definitively say that the Gaddafi regime has come to an end. The last major regime strongholds have fallen. The new government is consolidating the control over the country.
Shalom, shalom. First and foremost, I want to say call hello, Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem, Rakah, Quadash. I want to send double honors to the apostles, elders, and bishops of Great Millstone. Send much peace, love, salutations to Yaki. I'm out there pushing the word of Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, sincerity and truth. It's the brother Ariella. This is a World War III Algo update. And I stated, I told you Maduro was all cap. Now, back in August, I did a video talking about Venezuela and their regime and some of the stuff that they were doing and telling you how it was all capped. They don't have the capability, they don't have the resources, they don't have the know-how, they don't have the people to stave off what the United States was talking about doing, especially with someone like Donald Trump. And, you know, last night we saw that. We saw the United States military basically use their special forces and Marines to go in there, and their Air Force and Marines to, you know, basically take down the leader of Venezuela and take over the country in a few hours. Easy work, you know. And you know, I just played this video here because this is nothing new under the sun, as far as, you know, the United States using military might and capability to topple a government and take over its economy and political regime. All right, and they're doing it right now, and we talked about this. We've been talking about this, and so I just want to touch on a few points. Just want to touch on a few things that the brother Require Quam has sent me via Twitter. I sent him the link. He's at work, but I don't know if he's going to be able to jump in or not. If so, I'll let that brother jump in and speak his piece however he wants to. But no, Lord willing, this is not going to be very long. Like I said, here I did this video back. This was 4 months ago. Yeah, 4 months ago this video was done, and we talked about Venezuela and this through what we saw through the spirit of what could happen and everything like that. And I just didn't see much resistance that could be done. And as you can see, I'm watching this video saying Venezuela's Maduro deploys militia after reports say Trump sent warships, which this has all been planned out for some time. And Venezuela never stood a chance if they wasn't going to get any help from some of their so-called allies, which I'm tired of even calling these people allies, as they sit back and watch the United States debo everybody around and the small hats over there in the state of Israel. So we're gonna see, the Most High is moving on the minds of the kings of the earth. The Most High is moving on the mind of King Trump, and he, like the scripture says, he's more stout amongst his fellows, and he's moving in that way. Okay, and eventually it's gonna trigger a global response, from these different kings of the earth. But for now, different moves are being made in the background, and most of this stuff is not war. It's just rumors of wars, but most of this stuff is purely economic. Okay, purely economic. Okay, and it's coordinated by the elites. And we're gonna touch in on some of these things, so Lord willing, this will be edifying, because on the face of things, it's like, what the hell is going on? We just want the oil, but it's a lot more points globally than that. Okay, so let me play this. It's absolutely retarded and ridiculous, and you should know that it's just talking. Most of these people will not be armed. If they are part of the militia, if they have they're one of the poorest countries.
Activated and armed, will be out marching in cities across Venezuela. This is Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro's special strategy to counter threats from the United States.
This week, I will activate a special plan to guarantee coverage with more than 4,500,000 militiamen throughout the national territory. Militias prepared, activated, and armed.
Now, the first thing that should come in your head is, how are they going to arm 4.5 million people? If they have they're one of the poorest countries in South America, where are they going to get the munitions to fund this? How are they going to pay for the food for these people? Just from the outset, it sounds absolutely retarded and ridiculous, and you should know that it's just talking. Most of these people will not be armed. If they are part of the militia group, it's going to be dysfunctional. It's not going to be very well organized, and it damn sure won't stop the United States military, which has basically created a ransom on Maduro's head, which will likely create splinter groups within Venezuela of opposition groups funding people to say, you know what, how about we capture this dude and get the ransom money? So all Esau doing is stirring things up and creating confusion within Venezuela. Meanwhile, he's vilifying the tribes. It's just basically justifying the crackdown that Esau wants to bring on you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. And they've always used this angle, right? Because most of the drugs that we know that's coming out of South America is not coming from Venezuela. It's coming from Colombia. Right? It might be getting trafficked through Venezuela in some processes, but the reason why they're having to putting warships out there is stupid. That don't even make sense, because they're moving this stuff on boats that's zipping and moving through the waters quickly. So it's all a ploy, because Esau's not going to stop the movement of cocaine, drugs. Esau don't care about that. They too busy using it themselves. They love coke. So-called white man loves cocaine way more than Negroes love crack. Okay? Cocaine is number one. All right? So yeah, so we went and talked about that, how this is just all, it was all cap, and you saw how quickly and easily the United States was able to topple this regime. It literally took just a couple minutes. You know, but there's a lot more things going on. And Esau always plays these games. He always plays these games, man. Like they're trying to save people, like they're trying to stop. So many 300,000 people are dying from drugs. It's worse than a war and all these other BS. And all they said to do is just take over industries and take over resources and take over people's lands. Psalms 55:21 says, the words of his mouth were smoother than butter, but war was in his heart. His words were softer than oil, yet were they drawn swords. As soon as you saw the warships and everything like that outside of Venezuela, everybody knew it was up. And the fact that Maduro's generals and everybody like that couldn't start to create an escape plan back in August, the fact that he got caught so easily is a signal that he got betrayed, or he's in on it too. One of the two. Either he got betrayed or he was in on it too. And he's somewhere sipping a Scotch bourbon with the United States or whoever he's with. Either one. You know, and I think Required Quam sent me something on that. Let me see. Okay, here it is. Boom. He sent me this, a post on brutal truth bombs. Okay. Get out of the way. It says, even the most retarded military in the world would have shot down a few of the many unprotected helicopters flying around like that, right? And now they said that the United States had already taken down a lot of the Venezuela, you know, comms and capability to detect the aircraft and stuff like that. So I don't know. It says, and Venezuela has a pretty solid air defense network, from the Pastiers to the S-300s to the BUKs and short-range manpads, right? Maduro got sold out like Assad. That's how the U.S. wins nowadays, through CGI and trickery. Generals and bureaucrats probably made a secret deal with the U.S., which is why not a single air defense system went off against the Americans. There was a stand-down order. Everything else about Wolaora explosions and where's Maduro is for show and public consumption by Americans and Venezuelans. Charades. Yeah, so from the outside looking in, it seems like something else is about. Like other moves are being played. All right. Well, I had sent it into the chat with the head that, you know, just hours before, Chinese diplomats were there in Venezuela. You know, they were able to get out, move around, and everything like that. You know. So what's really going on? You know what I'm saying? All of these things just don't. It's just too much. It's just too much. Like All right. Let's see. Which one am I gonna play? I'm gonna play this one. Let's go bit of this play.
The United States military buildup in the Caribbean is not about Venezuelan narco trafficking. It's about an emerging threat to the economic heart of the United States. Now, if that sounds like a reach, just stay with me, because to understand why this matters, you need to understand the geography that built America. Now, every serious empire grew on a river. The Egyptians didn't build a kingdom in the desert, they built one on the Nile, the original economic highway that carried grain and stone across the land. The first cities in Mesopotamia rose on the Tigris and the Euphrates. Floodplains became farmland and trade routes connected continents. China's dynasties stood on the back of the Yellow River. It fed the population and it fed the bureaucracy. And Europe repeated this pattern. Rome on the Tiber, France on the Seine, Germany on the Rhine, Russia on the Volga, all of them scaled because rivers move more goods at lower cost than any road network ever could. They do more than nourish the soil. They knit whole economies together long before highways, rail lines, and container ships even existed. Now, the Mississippi River is the modern giant in this story. It is the Nile, the Rhine, and the Yellow combined, but larger, more industrial, and plugged straight into global markets through the Gulf of Mexico. So for the United States, every major inland artery flows into it. The Missouri River, the Ohio River, the Arkansas, the Tennessee rivers. Together, they form the largest navigable inland waterway network on Earth, draining about 41% of the continental United States. And as a consequence, more than 500 million tons of cargo move down that system every single year. That's grain from Iowa, soybeans from Illinois, coal from Kentucky, chemicals from the refineries that line the river's industrial corridor. Now look, river barges are slow, they're boring, but they are incredibly cheap. A ton of cargo moved by barge costs about 1/10 the price if you were to move that cargo by rail or truck. The cost advantage is the reason the United States is still one of the world's largest and most efficient agricultural exporters. More than 60% of American grain exports begin on a barge in the Midwest and end at a deep water port in Louisiana. But the river is actually only half of this story. The real pressure point is where the Mississippi meets the sea, the Gulf of Mexico. The Gulf is where American industry hits the open ocean, but it is also the center.
Nah, bro. It's the Gulf of America, bro. Get it right before Trump comes slap your ass.
Of U.S. energy production and refining. Let's have a look at these numbers. 47% of U.S. refining capacity sits on the Gulf. 20% of U.S. crude oil production comes from offshore platforms in the Gulf. Nearly 100% of LNG export terminals are in Texas and Louisiana on the Gulf Coast. Gulf refineries process more than 10 million barrels per day of crude into gasoline, diesel, jet fuel, and petrochemicals. The Gulf handles half of all U.S. waterborne commerce by tonnage. And this includes oil imports that are refined and then shipped to Europe or Latin America. All of this adds up to one thing. The Gulf of Mexico is an extraordinary concentration of risk. More than 4,000 platforms, pipelines, refineries, and export terminals cluster along the coasts of Texas and Louisiana, and they form the most valuable and most critical energy infrastructure anywhere in the Western Hemisphere, all within a 200-mile radius. From a military perspective, this is both a strength and a vulnerability. Now, it's a strength because the U.S. can defend it efficiently, right? Coast Guard assets run constant overwatch on shipping lanes and offshore platforms, and the Navy supports the region with destroyers, cutters, and submarines, and patrol aircraft operating out of Key West.
Well, that makes me think of that scripture that talks about the unwalled villages. If somebody can find that one, because you know the way that the United States kind of sits in the Western Hemisphere, and it's surrounded by the oceans, it makes it more defensible and harder to get to. You know what I'm saying? So what he's leading up into is how important the Gulf of America is. The Gulf of Mexico is, and how, you know, when you look at Venezuela and its relationship with China and Russia, it was becoming a threat. And that's why when you listen to the speech that Trump made, you know, this earlier today, he talks about the Monroe Doctrine, right? And if you look up the Monroe Doctrine, basically it's saying how they didn't want any other powers running their hemisphere. It says the Monroe Doctrine, proclaimed by President James Monroe in 1823, was a U.S. foreign policy opposing European colonialism and interference in the Western Hemisphere, declaring the Americas off limits for future colonization and establishing separate spheres of influence for Europe and the Americas. It warned European powers against further colonization or meddling in independent nations' affairs in the New World, in exchange for the U.S. not interfering in European conflicts. And you see how this is a bunch of hypocrisy. because the United States has meddled with the Ukraine and several other conflicts that happen over in the East and in Europe. Okay, it says becoming a cornerstone of American foreign policy and asserting the U.S. leadership in the hemisphere. So Trump mentions this amongst the other nation, mentions this in his speech about keeping these other nations basically out. Okay, so they pushing it. They pushing it hard. The Wada Akshaman, Ban Yashar put Ezekiel 30 and 11. And thou shalt say, I will go up to the land of unwalled villages, and I will go to them that are at rest, that dwell safely, all of them dwelling without walls and having neither bars nor gates. So yeah, America kind of sits in a place of rest and comfort militarily, because it's got those two oceans surrounding it as protection. I'm gonna play a little bit more of this, and then I'm gonna move on because he's taking too long to get to the point.
Important, Pascagoula. But it's a vulnerability because any adversary that gains a foothold in the Caribbean can threaten the entire system. They don't need to invade, they only need proximity. Close enough to carry out surveillance, close enough to position anti-ship missiles, close enough to lay sea mines or attack port infrastructure. Now, with that context, we can return to the question at hand. Why has the United States assembled the largest military presence in the Caribbean since the 1990s? And the official story is simple. Venezuela is a narco state. President Maduro is corrupt. The United States is cracking down on drug flows. Now, this narrative is convenient, but it's not true. Fentanyl, the drug responsible for the most U.S. overdose deaths, comes almost entirely from Mexico, with precursor chemicals from China. Cocaine entering the United States is overwhelmingly produced in Colombia and trafficked through Central America and Mexico. Venezuela plays a secondary route at best, with no evidence that it's a major pipeline into the United States. Both the UN and US-owned government data shows Venezuela's share of US drug flows is more or less a rounding error when compared to Mexico, Colombia, Guatemala, Honduras, and none of the core substances driving the U.S. drug crisis originate in Venezuela in any meaningful quantities.
Yeah.
There is no.
But they have the media, they have the propaganda machines to, and this shows you how stupid people are in general. This is one Google search away from knowing that that narrative that they were pushing was a bunch of propaganda and BS. Okay. But still, even if the people did know that there was no narco terrorism coming from Venezuela, would the people do anything? No. Why? Because the people are absolute sheep. They're sheep, right? And the Most High is actually pushing this thing just to be stirred up even more, right? I read this on almost every World War III Algo. I read Psalms 140. Because it's so relevant, right? Psalms 141, it says, deliver me, O Lord, from the evil man, preserve me from the violent man, which imagine mischiefs in their heart. They imagine mischiefs. They make up these narratives. They find and they plot and they scheme, like it talks about in Psalm 64. Their heart is deep, right? It says, which imagine mischiefs in their heart. Continually are they gathered together for war, right? This is what they continually do. To what? They covet fields and take them by violence. This is all they think about. This is all they want to do.
No empirical basis to call it a major narco state. Yet, the United States deployed the USS Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group. Now, this means 5 destroyers, 1 cruiser, 70 aircraft, an amphibious ready group carrying the 22nd Marine Expeditionary Unit, a nuclear attack submarine, and the Special Operations Mothership Ocean Trader. It's reactivated bases in Puerto Rico and added F-35s, patrol aircraft, Ospreys, heavy lift helicopters, MQ-9 Reapers, and robotic air-to-surface missile systems. About 15,000 personnel, more than a dozen warships. This is the most concentrated show of American power in nearly 30 years. So we have to ask, if it's not about drugs, what's it about? Now, the answer from my perspective, appears a few months before this buildup. In March of 2025, Russia signed a military cooperation agreement with Cuba that had just been ratified by the State Duma. Now, this treaty provides a framework for future military cooperation. That means joint training, arms supplies, and potential revival of Russian military facilities on the island of Cuba, including signal and intelligence sites. Now, Russian analysts describe this move as...
Now, this is where we get into the good stuff, okay? Because basically, Trump is going to force the hands of these other nations to have to stand up. But they're systematically taking away these other nations' advantages that were in the West and in the Middle East. Okay? So if Russia moves forward with trying to complete some arms deals that it had with Venezuela and Cuba, it could trigger the United States going into Cuba and saying, hey, this is a threat. We need to protect our sovereignty out here in these waters. And Trump is not really getting much backlash from literally invading a country and taking it over in 2026. He's being praised for an illegal act of war. So what's going to stop King Trump from going into Cuba or doing something like that? Nothing. Not a damn thing. All right? And we're going to get to this part. We're going to get to that. Let me keep going.
As symmetrical retaliation for the long-range weapons the U.S. sent to Ukraine. They noted at the
and as I go through this information in a minute here, I'm gonna give you a little bit more of what I think might be happening. My best guesstimation. Okay.
The agreement could, in principle, allow deployment of any offensive system that both the Cuban and the Russian governments approve. That was in March. And then came June. Russian Navy ships and a Yasin M-class guided missile nuclear submarine entered Cuban territorial waters 90 miles from the United States. Now, this is not a small detail. Cuba sits at the mouth of the Gulf of Mexico, like a cork in a bottle. Every major shipping route that feeds America's Gulf Coast, every tanker carrying LNG exports, every container ship bound for Houston or New Orleans, every naval vessel entering or leaving bases from Pensacola to Corpus Christi pass within Cuba's effective range. Cuba is less than 500 miles from New Orleans and less than 300 miles from the Florida Keys. Now that proximity compresses American reaction time to almost zero. A cruise missile launched from Cuban waters could hit critical Gulf infrastructure in minutes. And this is why Cuba has never been treated like any other Latin American state that happens to align with Moscow or Beijing. The issue is not ideology. The issue is geography. So let me ask you, what makes more sense? The United States deployed the largest force in a generation to chase a few smugglers and fishing boats, or that Washington is responding to the sudden arrival of Russian naval power next to the single most significant vulnerability in the American economy. Now, after all of this, the next question should be obvious. Who is actually hustling who? The United States may be hustling us by point.
Boom. So he did this video a month ago, and you can go to his channel, The Jay Martin Show. It's not about Venezuela, they're hiding the real crisis, right? Which is basically trying to shore up any type of military buildup or economic infrastructure that's opposed to the United States, trying to get that out the way, moving forward, all right? So we see a lot of these moves being made. China is making similar moves over there off of their border and their coast, okay? Now, I feel like this video here, I'm not going to play it. It's a good video, though. This is a good channel. I don't know why I'm not subscribed to it. Fix that. AI Telly is good. They basically explained everything and break down the attack. and they talk about all the points and everything. And he breaks it down very, very well. But I'm not going to play it. You can go type this in and watch it for yourselves. U.S. invasion plans against Venezuela explained from AI Telly. Very good video. But it's more just being nerdy, which you know I can do. Let's go to the next one. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. All right, this is where I want to go with it. Seeing the response from these other nations, like Russia, triggers me to like seeing the way that basically Venezuela laid down and Maduro gave himself up. Seeing how the so-called allies for Venezuela didn't do shit triggers to me a mindset that these are coordinated things. Like these people are talking to each other. China was just in Venezuela. They probably got a debrief on what was going to happen from the United States. They probably talked with different officials over in Venezuela on how we're going to move and what's going to go down. This right here is on Mitchell sent. He said, statement by Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs regarding the armed aggression by the United States against Venezuela. This morning, the U.S. committed an act of armed aggression against Venezuela. This development gives rise to deep concern and warrants condemnation. The pretext used to justify these actions are untenable. Idealized animosity has prevailed over pragmatic engagement, as well as over any readiness to build relations based on trust and predictability. In the current situation, it is essential to, above all, to prevent further escalation and to focus on finding a solution through dialogue. See all this bullshit, right? And China's gonna probably say something similar. Oh, you know, we need to find a peaceful way to resolve this. Meanwhile, your so-called allies are getting slapped up. You know. So I wanted to read some of these comments because I felt like they were hilarious. Right? One guy said, might as well send some beauty contestants to Trump from Russia. What the F is this cuck statement? The next person said, Russia and China were part of the plot. Some kind of deal was broken. Either Maduro has accepted the exfiltration, maybe using a Chinese delegation jet after a few photo shoots for the American gullible folks, or Maduro was betrayed by his own government and elites. See? And somebody going crazy right there. I'm gonna have to go and skip on that. Then somebody said, is he serious? What the hell? You might as well just roll over and die. Empty statements as always. It's time for the Tsar Bumble in Washington. I don't somebody said effing Putin continues to sell out his allies. Russia betrayed Venezuela. And that's the sentiment that you get when you see the United States roll on all of these, roll on Iran, roll on Syria, now rolling on Venezuela, and probably very soon they're going to roll on Cuba. Oh, yeah, and they're also rolling on Nigeria, okay, which they bombed earlier. Earlier this week. Yeah, bombed them. You know? So it makes you wonder, okay, is everybody in on this? You know, because when you listen to Trump, he's just straight up with it. He don't care. So if the United States is going to just basically take over Venezuela and maybe move forward on a few other assets in the Western Hemisphere, what does that mean for what's going on over in the East? And how does this play into moving into this next digital MOTB system economy? It seems like the lines are being drawn in the sand zone. We're going to run this side, y'all run this side, and we all meet in the middle. Okay? And like I told you, like it's always been two sides of the same coin. When it comes to trade, when it comes to everything like that, these nations, they play like they're their enemies, but behind the scenes there, it's WWE, it's the World Wrestling Federation. It's the new world with Hulk, the Hulkster Maniacs, and Razor Ramon. It's all games, if you understand it. I always talk about the ancient relationship that the Moab, who is the so-called Chinese, have had with Esau, with Edom. And they're just shoring up a lot of these things. That's why China was over in Venezuela the same day that the regime was taken over. And then Trump made a statement that, oh yeah, China's gonna get their oil because we have a great relationship with them. He literally said that. Okay? So all of these things were coordinated moves, man. How the Most High activates this thing to where it turns into World War III, we have yet to see that type of motion. Right now, they seem fully fixated on the MOTV systems, from what I can tell. Okay? But we know a part of it is going to be the state of Israel drawing these nations out. Because after they finish up, there's certain deals that they're going to probably make in the Ukraine, certain deals they're going to probably make in Taiwan. And then they're going to move back into trying to take over Gaza and the rest of the Middle East. And which we know is a powder keg from reading Joel, the 3rd chapter, and all the other scriptures and prophecies. Okay? Now, I typed in I just typed trade between Edom and Moab. And AI put this. It says, in the ancient Near East, trade between Edom and Moab was primarily defined by their shared control of the King's Highway, a vital north-south artery connecting the Red Sea to Syria. The King's Highway, both kingdoms derived significant revenue by taxing merchant caravans traveling through their territories. This route facilitated the movement of luxury goods, including incense and spices, from northern Arabia and precious metals. Now, Ari Isaac was talking about this last night at the camp. It says copper industry. Edom was a major producer of copper, particularly at sites like Kirbat Nahas and the Timna Valley. While Moab was primarily agricultural, some scholars suggest it may have benefited from or participated in the distribution networks of Edomite copper as it moved northward. Agricultural exchange. Moab's economy was more heavily based on agriculture and herding, right? Said notably sheep and wool, compared to Edom's more arid, resource-focused economy. This likely led to a local exchange of foodstuffs for specialized minerals or finished metal goods. Transit hubs. Edom's port as on Gabar on the Red Sea served as a gateway for maritime goods, which were the transported overland through Edom and into Moab and further distribution. Now, when you see these type of things, you know that they're going to have, along with trade deals, that they're going to basically be friends and move in unison. Okay? They're going to move in unison. And we see that even to this day. To this day. That's why the scripture talks about woe unto you, Babylon and Asia. It talks about Asia, how they basically mimicked and did the same thing as Babylon. And that's what we see with this Chinese economy. And they're probably moving in junction here. Okay? Let me play some of this stuff.
In place.
Let's go back.
Everyone knows the oil business in Venezuela has been a bust, a total bust for a long period of time. They were pumping almost nothing by comparison to what they could have been pumping and what could have taken place. We're going to have our very large United States oil companies, the biggest anywhere in the world, go in, spend billions of dollars, fix the badly broken infrastructure, the oil infrastructure, and start making money for the country. As everyone knows,
I don't know if he had AI write that or whatever, but it's just letting you know that this has been the plan all along. And China and Russia are not going to do anything to stop it, because it's very likely that they're in on it as well. Okay? Very likely that they're in on it.
Do a safe, proper, and judicious transition. So we don't want to be involved with having somebody else get in, and we have the same situation that we had for the last long period of years.
And look at that time. Just restart this page. Very interesting.
As we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition. So we don't want to be involved with having somebody else get in, and we have the same situation that we had for the last long period of years. So we are going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition. And it has to be judicious because that's what we're all about. We want peace, liberty, and justice for the great people of Venezuela. And that includes many from Venezuela that are now living in the United States and want to go back to their country. It's their homeland. We can't take a chance that somebody else takes over Venezuela that doesn't have the good of the Venezuelan people in mind. We've had decades of that. We're not going to let that happen. We're there now, and what people don't understand, but they understand as I say this, we're there now, but we're going to stay until such time as the proper transition can take place. So we're going to stay until such time as we're going to run it essentially until such time as a proper transition can take place.
We're going to run it. He just straight up told you, we're taking over. Yeah, we invade your country. We got it. And you best to believe the United States ain't leaving. They ain't going nowhere. Right? Micah 2:1 says, woe to them that devise iniquity and work evil upon their beds. They plan these things out, bro. Thoroughly. When the morning is light, they practice it because it's in the power of their hands. They cover fields and take them by violence, and houses and take them away. So they oppress a man and his house, even a man and his heritage. Okay? So they're able to go in, regime change, take over the oil refineries, put in the United States corporations, send militias and the military to go and defend it, and say, oh, yeah, we'll stay until we see a proper regime change. Okay? Now, there's reports that the vice president was just like, okay, you know, it's a female. Do whatever y'all need, but just let us know how Maduro's doing. All right? They said that she fled to Russia. I don't know how the hell she got out. How the president can't get out, but your ass is in Russia? She probably was in on it. You know, this is just one big mess. Everything, it doesn't make sense. And it's all over the place, man. Okay? It's the big old mess.
As everyone knows, the oil business in Venezuela has been a bust, a total bust for a long period of time. They were pumping almost nothing by comparison to what they could have been pumping and what could have taken place. We're going to have our very large United States oil companies, the biggest anywhere in the world, go in, spend billions of dollars, fix the badly broken infrastructure, the oil infrastructure, and start making money for the country. And we are ready to stage a second and much larger attack if we need to do so. So we were prepared to do a second wave if...
Yeah, so he talks about that second wave. This is a shortened version that's on CNN that dropped an hour ago if y'all want to go watch it, okay? So let me get this. This is the final one that Macquarie Plum has sent to me. And I felt like it was interesting what this person had wrote. From Jersey, man, they said, Trump has accepted the multipolar world order, right? It says, 2, Ukraine goes to Putin. 3, Taiwan goes to China. 4, Iran gets a regime shift. Israel becomes de facto hegemonic leader of the Middle East. 6, Kyrgyzstan loading, now Kurds. Now is the time, right? Now, the thing about this number 6 is the Turkish people is not going to go for that. Not at all. So, all of these types of different moves that they're making all over the place, it's interesting to see how they think that this is going to play out and how the Most High is going to work on the minds of some of these leaders and some of these kings. So all of these things is basically a powder keg. This last move was a big one, and it's a big signal to these other nations about the mindset that Trump has and the mindset that America has about being forceful and taking over. Will it put these other nations on the defense, or at this time? We shall see. But I believe most of these moves are just economic, political moves to set their governments up for this MOTB. And as they try to get this MOTB done, these nations are going to start to disagree on the control and the resources and how things are moved. And then they're going to fight because Europe is going to have to get involved. And Europe really don't like America like that. Europeans don't like America. Okay? They like American money, but that's it. So there's a lot of different moves that can be made off of this thing. Yeah, exactly. The brother said they took over to go in and spend billions of dollars to produce oil in order to give it back to the people of Venezuela. Yeah, okay, my nigga. Right. They ain't going nowhere. They're taking that bitch over, and it's very likely they're gonna probably move on Cuba too. They're gonna move on Cuba too. They're gonna bring something up about Cuba and missiles and threatening us, and roll up in that bad boy too. So a lot of these shifts being made, but if they get this, if they come and talk about peace talks out of Ukraine and peace talks out of Taiwan, they're about to roll on Iran. It's over, and we'll see how that goes. But we know ultimately the Most High is going to send this thing into a frenzy. I'm gonna read this and then roll out. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 1. It says, "But of the times and the seasons, brethren, ye have no need that I write unto you, for yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so cometh as a thief in the night. For when they shall say peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape." Right? So as they think that they're making these moves and they're controlling everything, and we went in there and we had no casualties. It was just very smooth. We took over we took Maduro down, and it was bad. It's bad, but now we're gonna build it back up. We're gonna run it. We're gonna run it until we can transition. So they make it seem like they got it under control, but the Most High is gonna stir up these nations, bro. He's gonna stir up these nations, like the scripture says. The Most High, the Lord has a controversy with these nations, so things are gonna be stirred up. But like I said, bro, I told y'all Maduro was all cap. I told y'all back in August, bro. I told y'all back in August Maduro was all cap, and so I kind of go into that country and everything like that, but I had a feeling like, man, this dude ain't worth about nothing. So he got swooped up out of there. They probably gonna give him that Saddam Hussein treatment and set up another puppet leader, and then we're gonna see how it goes from here. But with that being said, I'm gonna say, call hello Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem Rakah Kodash. Send double honors to the apostles, the elders, and bishops of Great Millstone. Much peace, love, salutations to Yakim out there pushing the word of Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, sincere in the truth. Shalom.